What up, coordination? On this episode of the GreenPill Pod, we are talking about what information wants with Rhys Lindmark. So as we enter the information age, Rhys breaks down the history of the universe in terms of information games, information creating complexity after the Big Bang, and as we have galaxies and orbital systems that are evolving, information getting into more and more complex puzzle pieces as nuclear fusion happens inside of stars, nuclear fission, excuse me. And then we get into information wanting to be replicated. So basically, genes are information replicators, memes are information replicators, and chemes, which are just computer memes driven by AI, are information replicators. And so Rhys is just this really interesting mind that has been in the Web3 space, Web3 adjacent for a while. I've known him for about 5 years. We got to catching up at DevCon about the new book that he's writing entitled What Information Wants. And I was like, yo, you got to give the GreenPill audience an alpha leak on this What Information Wants thing. So the book isn't even out, but I got him to come on and just rap with me about what information wants. And I think it was one of the most fun episodes that we've done together. Because I just feel this natural rapport with Rhys. He's just this smart, nerdy, intellectual person. And B, because some of it really intersects with how do we build a regenerative crypto economic economy. And 3, Rhys is just a good guy. So this is a really fun episode, and I think that you're going to enjoy it. Without further ado, I give you What Information Wants with the only Rhys Lindmark.
GOLDFINCH is a decentralized credit protocol with a mission to connect the world's capital to the world's growth. GOLDFINCH focuses on real yields from real companies, so start lending your USDC to real businesses driving growth worldwide. GOLDFINCH's borrowers are proven fintechs and credit funds in emerging markets who need access to GOLDFINCH's capital to drive economic growth in regions faced with barriers to financial access. In just under 2 years, GOLDFINCH has loaned over 100 million USDC, reaching over 1 million people and businesses across 28 countries. GOLDFINCH is doing what DeFi was always meant to do, expanding financial access to those who have historically been shut out of the TradFi system. So, become a GOLDFINCH member to put your USDC to work, empowering real businesses' growth. Join GOLDFINCH's new member vaults to be an active investor and take part in supporting GOLDFINCH's security and expansion. Receive yield enhancements generated by protocol revenue, plus access exclusive communication channels and more. So go to goldfinch.finance to get started. COINSHIFT is a leading treasury management and infrastructure platform for DAOs and crypto businesses that need to manage their treasury operations. Every crypto org needs to manage its treasury, and COINSHIFT offers a simple, flexible, and efficient multi-chain treasury management platform built on top of the highly secure Gnosis Safe. With COINSHIFT, your organization can go from primitive single-chain treasury management to expressive, flexible, and multi-chain treasury features, such as global user management, global contacts, proposal management, and many other features that can be shared across an entire organization, allowing users to save time and reduce operational burdens and gas costs. COINSHIFT even has data tools like account reporting across the 7 chains on which it operates. Used by industry powerhouses such as Uniswap Grants, Balancer, Consensus, and Masari, COINSHIFT is speeding up the coordination and efficiency of the organizations that use it. You have to keep up with the frontier, and COINSHIFT makes that easy. So sign up at coinshift.xyz/bankless.
Rhys, what's up?
Yo, dude. Nothing much. How you doing?
Just got back from DevCon, reacquainting myself with the real world.
The non-Bogota world. Yeah, it's nice to be back. How was your DevCon experience?
It was pretty good. It was electric there for sure. But I'm going back between the two worlds I traverse. One where a lot of people know who I am, and we get into crypto nerdery, and now I'm in the suburbs of Colorado being a dad. So it's quite a change.
That is funny. Yeah, you kind of go. It's fun to like go to a place and be like, oh, both all the friends and also people are like, oh my God, public goods are good or whatever. And then you just come back and you're like, oh, don't forget you're a nobody.
Don't forget to pick up the kids from school.
Exactly. Also that.
Weird. Well, let's dive in. So I want to talk about Root. I want to talk about the work that you've been doing in the ecosystem, and you're writing a book. So what's the title of the book?
The title of the book is What Information Wants.
Okay, let's start there. What does information want, Rhys Lindmark?
Well, information. Well, the first thing I want to note is, the book is going to be a visual book, and it's been inspired by Inawaki sent me his Figma, and so I just kind of duplicated the Figma, and I have my own little Figma that you can check out online. And so that's how I'm building it. So thank you for your open sourcing all the things.
Yeah, happy to. It's almost like information wants to be copied.
Oh my God.
Alpha leak.
It's true. Yeah, so information does it wants to be copied. And so the idea behind the book is that yeah, we're in the information age, and in order to understand the information age, we need to understand information through the ages. And so, what you can look at is these patterns that emerge over time, and those patterns you could call them information. And those informational patterns are at the beginning, it was before life. We don't really need to talk about that, but once life emerged, these replicators started to emerge, these genes, and then they replicated to create the whole tree of life. And then now we have these memes, these mimetic replicators that create the whole tree of ideas and technology. Um,
Mm.
we have computers who are coming with its new replicator that we can talk about later. But yeah, information wants to, it kind of wants to be free. It kind of wants to not be free. The main thing it wants is to be replicated.
Hmm. Got it. So there's an explosion of the universe with the Big Bang, cosmic evolution for many years, but and in some way, I don't know if you view that as information, but it feels like the real unlock for information comes when you build replicators into these information. And it starts with genes, and it gets into memes, and then what's the last one? It's chemetics. Okay, okay,
Computer memes. Yeah. So
okay.
the idea is yeah, so I like to think of it as in the book, you can imagine the book is like a sapien style big history book or cosmic evolution book. And at the beginning, yeah, before replicators with the Big Bang, there was the environment was still providing puzzles, but the puzzles that it was providing was something like, okay, we have gravity, we have electromagnetism. What kinds of celestial objects and celestial species will emerge that kind of fit those environmental niches,
Yeah.
those kind of puzzles. And the things that emerged were all these orbiting blobs. So galaxies are these like big orbiting blobs. Solar systems and planets are kind of like middle-sized orbiting blobs, and things like atoms, electrons moving around an atom are kind of like small orbiting blobs. And so you have all these orbiting blobs that are the answers to the puzzle from the environment.
Hmm.
And then later, as you note, but none of those replicate. A sun doesn't want to make more suns. It
Yeah.
doesn't have kind of an agentful view on society,
Yeah.
on reality. But once we get replicators, genes, and memes, then those things do want to replicate.
Do you think of like Reese and I had a dinner at DevCon where we got there deep on this, and so I'm just trying to call that back in my mind. But we were talking about how entropy and the fact that within a sun you're creating more and more complex elements, and then those eventually get exploded out. Those almost provide the atomic Legos that they serve for the replicators. So it's almost like entropy is what is leading to more complex patterns and information games that can make information into self-replication.
Yeah, I think there's the way. So totally agree with that. The way I kind of think about that is, you get these beautiful, suns start with hydrogen and helium. That's how the universe started. And then you get this amazing thing where the hydrogen and helium, it gets turned into more intense elements in the stars, and then those get exploded out, and then we get things like planets. And then when you're in a watery planet like ours, you can have a very promiscuous molecule like carbon. There's 200, or sorry, like an element like carbon. There's 200 different elements, but only the organic ones, carbon and a couple others, are the ones who are actually can actually turn into these like new kinds of patterns. And so the carbon starts to link up with other carbons and start to just try out, what if I look like this, what if I look like this, what if I look like this, and eventually you get a thing that has an autocatalytic reaction that produces more copies of itself, that then is able to quote unquote beat entropy. So entropy is trying to take things and turn them down and trying to depatternize things, while this is saying, wait a second, let's like move up the entropy gradient and create something that needs energy in order to keep on creating patterns of itself. And so it's kind of pushing against entropy there.
Hmm. Great. Well, really looking for the book, forward to the book, and hopefully we're going to get some alpha leak of some of the best content that you got in there. What other themes of how replicators work are you really interested in exploring in this book?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, the goal of the book is to really, and don't worry, everybody will get the alpha leak, And as a side note, by the way, the book is being produced in public every month on this thing called the Intellect. So I have a little salon series that occurs, and so you can like come and chat with me about like the most recent chapter. So there's
Hmm.
alpha leak every month, if you want it. The other crucial bits of it are like I mean, the key idea behind the book is like I was just trying to get as close to like the base layer of reality as possible in order to
Hmm.
understand this next big transition for humanity. And so, um, what I'm, and so, but in order to do that,
Hmm.
you can't just look at history since the year 2000 and blah blah blah, Instacart this, Insta chat that, whatever. You have to kind of go deeper back in time, and not just humans, and not just, and so that's kind of, it's trying to understand how these core patterns emerge in order to really make sense of today's reality. And so I
Hmm.
think that the things that I'm excited to explore are, and you can imagine something like, within the green pill and adjacent ecosystems, it's like, how can we as a people create these like these symbiotic ecosystems with each other where we do want to make these replicators, but those replicators exist kind of in co-evolutionary symbiotic environments instead of
Hmm.
just like win lose kind of alpha predator environments. um
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm curious about, I'm very excited. I hope the book will be a relatively actionable book about the kinds of both memes that are spreading in society, like BLM or Me Too or MAGA, the kinds of why crypto is a powerful meme and why it's spreading, and so like that, making sure it's connected to the present is the crucial piece.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, there's two things that really come. Well, there's a bunch of stuff that's really interesting, but the two things that stand out to me are this idea that we're moving into the information age, and so you want to get into the base level of reality, first principles about information in order to understand the information age. That's interesting to me. But also, what are the parallels that we can learn? So, okay, so like if we're speed running the evolution of cometics and memetics, what is there to learn from biology and genes replicating then? And and that leads me to, I've had this theory about Web3 is that we're speed running the history of finance, and we're building this ecosystem. How do we speed run past like the Ponzi schemes and the scams, which are basically like the cancers and the viruses? And how do we get to like mycelial networks or dolphins or humans at like the apex predators? But like hopefully, another thing that we talked about in the Greg Landoa episode, which is like episode 6 or something, was keystone species, like species that define the ecological niche for everyone else. And what you really want is a keystone species that creates anti-fragility for the rest of the ecosystem, instead of like one that's going to explode. So I don't know, like that's kind of where my mind goes, and I'm curious if that brings up anything for you.
I mean, I love all that. I think that's great. I think, yeah, I would call something like Ethereum as a keystone species. It is a
Hmm.
underlying kind of protocol and substrate that then exists strongly memetically in the environment. It is solving a need for block space.
Yeah.
It has a strong ability to it stays retained for a long time. That's a crucial piece of any replicator. Is like you both want to move quickly in the environment, but you also
Hmm.
want to be retained for a long time. And
Mm.
Josh Stark has a great piece on atoms, institutions, and blockchains, and hardness, the idea of hardness, what he calls hardness, which is, yeah, that blockchains are hard. They stay around for a long time, just like institutions stay around and atoms stay around. And so, yeah, something like Ethereum, I agree, it's a great kind of keystone species, and you want those keystone species to be, yeah, to exist in loving symbiotic win-win relationships instead of a keystone species that like takes down the rest of the
Yeah.
ecosystem.
Let me ask you this. This is a provocative and almost nonsensical question, but what does it mean to be in a loving relationship with another, between memes or
That's a good question.
memes?
Yeah, it's a good question. Oh boy. I think that when I think about a loving, so the way that I think about this is kind of beginning with the end
You,
in mind,
you're
and
doing
the
great, by the
end
way.
that
My question was totally unfair, but you're really taking a swing at it, which
I'm
I
taking it
appreciate.
seriously. I'm taking
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it. What is love? I'm ready. Love means, and my answer is kind of a dumb answer. So, so your dumb question gets received by a dumb answer.
There we go.
The begin with the end in mind, and so the end that we want is a metastable relationship between the three replicators, between genes, memes, and chemes, these computer memes, aka between nature 1.0, the earth and biosphere, nature 2.0, humans and humanity, and then nature 3.0, like machines. We want a metastable reality between all those where all units are both within kind of for their own optimization function. They're like happy, but then also that the thing will kind of occur until the end of time. That's what we want. And so to be in loving relationship, essentially means to have to be kind of in holistic ethics and kind of bentoist ethics with the rest of the system, to take in and to understand the whole system both now and through time, and also to be taking actions that not only think about now me, but think about kind of future us and like the holistic system.
Right. So bentoism, we had Yancey Strickler on the pod, and that's taking us from now me type of incentives to future me to future us to now us. And it's a bento box of incentives. And then what's metastable? Does that just mean anti-fragile?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It just means it's stable, but like the stability is also stable.
Okay. Got it. So like the second derivative of stability
Yeah.
is stable. Got it. Okay. So yeah, I mean, if we speed run some of these patterns, what kind of things do you think we'll see, and what's most interesting to you within that design space?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I think the speed running of the patterns is interesting because I think there are yeah, I think it's a good frame to say that, cryptocurrency is speed running finance and speed running technology in different ways. And we know that that occurs because there's a kind of a transparent open source substrate with, open source is, financial compounding, open source, is
Mhm.
technology compounding. And so I think
Right. It feels
we
like it
definitely
allows open source allows information to be replicated more, so you have like a faster substrate for this evolution.
Yeah,
Also,
and I think that and I guess what I mean to say here is that the kind of speed running crypto, or rather that crypto speed runs finance is one frame on this. The other way to say this is that what I would say is something like, yeah, information technology, like computers and the internet, allow memes to speed run genes. Does that make sense?
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Um, and
I think
so
so.
yeah, I guess another way to say this is like the kind of replicators go through a cycle, and that genes did that over 4 billion years, and that memes have been doing it for roughly 200,000 years. But like or sorry, yeah, but so genes did it for 4 billion years, and memes have done it for 200,000 years since humans have emerged. But all the initial forms of memes are just kind of like spoken word, bum 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 bum, and then the written word and the printed word, and all that was kind of like the weak, kind of like a weak version of memes, like a pre-photosynthesis, pre-respiration, all that kind of version of memes. And now we have this kind of hyper. The memes are kind of in zeros and ones. Everything's connected, and so we can kind of speed run it fast. Let's just say what will actually happen. I think that the hope, and I think one of the crucial frames here, and I'll just present this and then stop. I think one of the crucial frames here is that when you think from this replicator lens, what it does is it takes the ego away from the human, and it allows us to say, okay, wait a second. It's not I'm just a vehicle for just like a blue whale is just a way for the genes inside the blue whale to reproduce themselves. Um, it's these tiny little genes, and then it makes this huge vehicle, the blue whale, to have sex and produce another bit of genes. So too are we vehicles for mimetic replication, that these ideas are kind of coming into our mind, and that we're just the vehicles for these memes to spread. And with that in mind, what we need to do is, if we want to create good environments for us going forward, the kind of the things that emerge, the replicators that emerge, are primarily a function of, they're all downstream of the puzzles that are created. And so, for example, photosynthesis is, there was a puzzle from the environment. It said, look, we have a sun that's nearby. It's very hot. It does these photons. Hello, replicators down there. You're trying to get energy. Try to do this puzzle. How can you take this
Mhm.
energy and turn
It's
it
like
into?
it's like an
Yeah.
evolutionary X prize.
Exactly, 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 exactly. So, um, so we have this evolutionary, and so now what we want to do is create mimetic X prizes, and those prizes should be, we're kind of creating these niches. And so the classic example of this is just like a feed, or just like the fortune cookie Twitter, where it's like, if you know you can only have 140 or 280 characters, you're going to get fortune cookie Twitter. And so what we can do as a species is try to create homes for the memes that are actually good for us. So like creating long form content, or creating things that when the replicators convergently evolve and kind of inevitably evolve into them, that like the replicators that will emerge are actually good ones. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a lot to get into, but I think that one of the things that really is interesting to me is that just there's probably a ton of different analogies from biology that we can get into, but having just read Michael Pollan's Botany of Desire, I think
Mhm.
one of the interesting ideas there was like, as humans, we think that we use the plants. Like I think in Botany Desire, he talks about apples, potatoes, and cannabis, and one other one other plant that co-evolved with humans. But you know, that we think that we're evolving and caretaking these plants, but really they're kind of like manipulating us into replicating them. And then I wonder, well, what's the equivalent of the symbiosis with memes out there? Like, and to what extent is a meme landing in your brain the same as like a dandelion landing in fertile soil, right? Like if I say public goods are good, does that land and replicate in your mind? And there's virtuous, and then what are the externalities of those memes as they germinate? Are they going to destroy your mind, or are they going to help enlighten your mind? And how can we fortify our fertile soil against the weeds and make it more home to something that's more going to be regenerative using this lens? So and how do you react to
Sure.
that?
Well, yeah. So two big pieces there. The first, yeah, I love that. I think it's like, yeah, there's always co-domestication processes that are occurring.
Mm,
It's not just us domesticating plants and animals; it's that they also domesticate us. So that we're kind of co-domesticating. And similarly, as you're noting, there is a kind of a co-domestication process with like the memes themselves. And so I think one way that I kind of view it is um, that for something like public goods are good or something like bentoism, I kind of think of those as kind of inevitable um like mimetic phrases that are just kind of inevitable in the space because we know that public goods are good and we know that there was going to be some version of that idea that got collapsed into the smallest mimetic unit that it could be that would then spread within the ecosystem. So
mm,
as there emerged this ecosystem of crypto folks who are into regen and green pill and whatever, then we knew that we were going to get a word like public goods are good. um and so I think that like seeing these phrases as kind of like downstream of the like or like psychology or like the kind of mimetic ecosystem is I think one helpful thing. The other piece that you asked there was how can we how can we make it so that the memes that like live in our brains are good ones or whatever. um and I think that that one is interesting. I think the way that we can do that is what would I say here? I mean, um, there's many ways to do this, but I mean, a lot of it is just understanding how our brains are built, and then trying to mitigate the kind of existing system. So, for example, there's the famous quote by E.O. Wilson: "We have Paleolithic emotions with medieval institutions and godlike technology." And so, a lot of what we want to do today is embrace those Paleolithic emotions. We need to understand the computational neuroscience of our brains, and then as we start to build freaking Neuralink and these random things to create homes that will not just be kind of outrage driven machines, but will instead
yeah,
we're gonna recode our brains to be less outragey over time. That's just gonna
yeah.
happen.
Well, one of the things that concerns me a little bit is this race to the bottom of the brainstem that we just see on the internet, where like, our base desires, which are just basically like things that can be transmitted over the internet, is like hunger, rage is something that elicits an emotion, sex is something that sells. And so I feel like the memes that we've seen replicated in the early internet are just like, it's funny. I ran an online dating website when I was in my 20s, and I remember getting on a call with our ad guy, and he was like, yeah, like the CTA that's gonna have the highest click for this ad is like a girl where you can like see her cleavage. Like it's just a race to like get your higher click through rate by showing like tits. And and so like how do you avoid the race to the bottom of the brainstem? Like how do we elicit our higher emotions and create cooperation across distance when what draws our attention is things that are sort of like base, either elicit like a strong response but maybe aren't associated with our higher angels?
It's a great question. I think that this is where a kind of the idea of just adding in friction. I think this is where this comes. And so I think
Hmm.
part of it is saying, well, us within ourselves to say like, okay, the highest click through rate is this like cleavage woman or whatever. But then you can say, wait a second, is that like a value that we have as an org? Do we want that to be our thing, or can we like kind of push back against that? And I think then as you start to do that, you can create race to the top dynamics. And so you can say, hey, wait a second. let's look at all the different dating sites and how they kind of do their ads. And you can like
Yeah.
look at them. You can say, look at all these ones that all they are is just like essentially women and cleavage. And you can point at that and say that's a bad thing, or you can point at something else and say, look at these ones that are more like value aligned. And then people can start to
Mhm.
battle over this new, instead of just a proxy for value, which is click through rate and race to the bottom of brain sim and all those things. You can say, wait a second, we can actually decide to create a different evolutionary set over here and then have people race against that set. So I think that's like one way to kind of push that, is to kind of create race to the top dynamics that are actually more value aligned.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was on the Stoa, or I was at a Stoa meeting, which is this group of like philosophers that talk about Moloch, and one of the subjects that they discovered or they talked about was how to make Moloch work for you instead of against you. And one of the things they talk about is taking a race to the bottom and being a race to the top. And the example they gave was Elon Musk basically going against short-term incentives and pouring his whole reputation in his career and just showing that electric cars would work. And now we're basically in this environment in which all of the car companies are chasing him to generate electric cars, and Tesla has more of a market cap than all of the other car companies in at least the United States right now. So basically creating these like punctuated equilibriums where you change the dynamic of the evolutionary ecosystem to chase something that's more virtuous. But it kind of requires these like outliers who, I mean, I don't know if the Elon thing is a good example and he's very controversial, but how do you create those punctuated equilibriums is something me, as someone who thinks about how to create more regen web3, is always thinking about.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I think my main answer to it would be something like law of the adjacent possible, where you have to, and something like Elon, he knew that he could work with these values that were changing with these folks who were in rich people in in Silicon Valley who were climate worried, who already had a Prius, who were willing to pay 150K for this first, sports car, and that they wanted to look cool. And so you can kind of you can do a theory of change, kind of begin with the end in mind, back chaining, where you kind of move through the evolutionary space with each step being one that is possible, that is then
Right.
eventually able to like create a new category or whatever.
Hmm. Got it. Well, I think we've gone down a rabbit hole here. What are the other things that information wants, and what can we learn from that?
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep
Uh,
asking, but this is the easiest interview I've ever done. I'm just gonna keep on asking you what information wants.
that's great. That's great. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. So, I mean, we could talk about a couple different things here. Maybe one thing that I think would be interesting for people to understand is, oh boy. Yeah, I think that so information wants to replicate, information wants to be fit with its environment. We've already chatted about that. We've chatted a little bit about how information wants to, and by the way, the book is just structured like this, where it's like every couple of pages I have like a big thing that says information wants to blah blah blah. And so yeah, you can just keep asking that. The information wants to access energy. That's the In order to replicate, it needs to
Mm,
access energy, and so this is why at the start of when life started in the deep sea vents, it accessed the energy of the sea vents. And then
mhm.
eventually, yeah, there was the puzzle of, hey, there's the sun. How are you access energy from the sun? There's like, oh, wait, I can do it. I've like solved the puzzle. I could do photosynthesis now. And then later, when we got eukaryotes and we got cellular respiration, which was that, um, yeah, and this is another way to talk about informational stuff is once you get information wants to kind of, it wants to access energy and it wants to be fit in its environment, but it wants to do that as the environment is changing. So at the beginning we just had these laws that didn't really change, and that's why the whole universe is just a bunch of galaxies and planets and stuff. However, life on Earth, 99.99% of species have died out. Why is that? Well, it's because the environment is kind of changing. So in order to like continue to be fit, it's difficult. And so, for example, here you have once we got cyanobacteria, which did photosynthesis, that created a bunch of oxygen in the atmosphere. And then once there was oxygen, it was again a new puzzle. It was like, okay, there's access to energy here. Oxygen is fire. It's really powerful. There's a ton of energy there. How can you design a system that can take that oxygen and turn it into energy for the cell? And so that's when we got this thing called the mitochondria and cellular respiration, where it's able to like take all the energy and the electrons there, and like move them slowly through the electron transport chain to like to get the energy. So this is all to say that um, you can kind of think about how the environment is changing and how to access energy. And so then when we get to like the humans, obviously at the beginning for humans. the first puzzle was, how can you kind of, as a human, but this is before farming, how can you go across the entire earth and like, um, the puzzle was, there's all these big animals that haven't had an alpha predator. Can you kill them all? And humans were like, yeah, we can. We can get our sticks and stones and tools, and we're just going to kill all the megafauna, and we're going to go around the whole earth and just kill all the megafauna. Once we did that, then the next puzzle was, okay, now you control everything. Um, there's still all these plants and stuff that are around you. Can you domesticate them? And that's when we got farming, and that's when we got the agricultural revolution. It was like, okay, cool, you've answered that puzzle. Now there's much more humans. And then after that, I was like, oh, there's all this. The next puzzle was, you've kind of done all the land, but what's beneath the land? Oh shit, fossil fuels. Okay, cool. There's another puzzle to be solved. We did that, and now we're in this stage where it's like, can we solve the puzzle of moving away from fossil fuels and fusion and stuff like that, and our like constant desire for energy?
Working in Web3 is awesome. It's freeing, powerful, and so much fun. But working outside of the typical W2 employee structure is a deal breaker for so many people. OPOLIS is helping the self-sovereign worker focus on what they do best, their work, while OPOLIS manages the back end. There's a lot of nation-state overhead when working in Web3, and OPOLIS takes care of all of the back end stuff, freeing you up to do what you do best, your work. OPOLIS leverages group buying power through a community employment co-op, helping you save 20 to 50% on high-quality, affordable healthcare options through Cigna. So do what you love and maintain your financial security with OPOLIS. You must be authorized to work inside the United States to receive OPOLIS's benefits, but OPOLIS is expanding its services to Canada starting on June 1st of next year. So book a 30-minute free consultation with OPOLIS experts and join OPOLIS by December 31st to get 1,000 work and 1,000 bank tokens. Go to connect.opolis.co/bankless to get started. The world has woken up to refi, and CELO is here for it. CELO is the layer 1 for the regenerative finance movement. It's fast, planet positive, and built for the real world. CELO has committed to producing a sustainable future from day one and has built its technology around one of the lowest carbon impact consensus mechanisms, and is the world's first carbon negative EVM compatible layer 1 blockchain. CELO is a movement to create the conditions of prosperity for everyone, whether it's tokenizing carbon credits with Toucan, providing capital to underserved communities with Unicorn, or building for millions of users around the globe. CELO was created to transform crypto enthusiasts into a movement of changemakers. Follow along on Twitter @CELO.org to learn more about how CELO is accelerating refi for a positive, lasting impact on people, communities, and the planet. And if you're a builder interested in refi, be sure to join the Build with CELO hackathon live now with a prize pool of over $100,000.
It feels like, the base information seeking out energy is sort of a core fundamental thing, and it feels like we're in this local maxima where humanity has figured out how to pull energy out of the ground, but we've realized that we're not doing it in a metastable way. Now I know what metastability is. It's stability, and where the stability is stable. So what is the way in which humanity can descend from the local maxima of just only seeking more energy and climb the global maxima of metastable energy production? And can information replicate towards two north stars or like two goals at once, or is that too complicated for information or humans to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that so the hope now is, and the key thing. So when you look at evolutionary systems, and a lot of this is just like Dawkins' selfish gene and kind of other stuff, is
Hmm.
when do win-win games emerge? When do we escape the prisoner's dilemma? And it's when, and this is also with genes. When do genes escape the prisoner's dilemma? And it's when the shadow of the future is long. And so when when Awaki and I, if I like when Awaki and I got a beer, at DEF CON, if I if I knew we were going to be there for an hour, so if I started that conversation by like punching Awaki in the face, that would have been like a bad thing. And so what I did, I knew the shadow of the future was long enough and we were going to be there for an hour, so I should probably
Hmm.
be nice to the guy,
Right.
and so we as humans know the shadow of the future is long. This is the Future Lives Matter kind of EA perspective, and also the climate perspective. And so it's like effective altruism, by the way. And so we know the shadow of the future is long. And then we can say, oh, wait, not only are we playing for energy now, we're playing for energy later, and we're playing in a way that the fossil fuel way of just like self termination might not necessarily work here. We have to think in a longer term. So I think
Yeah.
that kind of taking into account that the shadow of the future is long is helpful, and then trying to actually insert those kind of future me, future us's into reality is really good. So, for example, in Scandinavia, they have on all of their like government board meetings or something, they have a person who sits there, and their whole role is to play the role of the someone in 2050. And so it's
Mhm.
someone who's sitting there who's like the voice of the future. And so I think finding ways to in general to kind of bring the future to the present and to give it a voice is really powerful. And then once we start to do that, then we can start to hopefully solve some of these energy problems that will be
Yeah.
more in alignment with the long future.
Yeah, the scary thing for me is like if you look at these evolutionary systems, if you get to this place where like a virus consumes its host, then the evolutionary niche that happens is your evolutionary niche never exists, or the evolutionary process that happens is your niche doesn't exist anymore, and that is the check and balance on you. Um, and so it's very much a natural selection thing to sort of get over your skis evolutionary, and then you cease to exist, and then that's how there's that check and balance towards metastability. But I don't want humanity to destroy its planet and therefore no longer have an evolutionary niche. You need that forward-thinking intelligence in order to find that metastability. And I think that that's the hard part if you look at an evolutionary system. Like, does humanity have to fuck it up and reset at a much smaller population in order to be able to learn these lessons? Or is it going to be able to do it? It's so intelligent that it can guide its evolution in a way that towards metastability without incurring that damage. That's where my mind goes, but I
Yep.
don't know if that brings up anything for you.
I think we're gonna. I think we're gonna do it. And this is like, there have been some studies about how natural disasters lead people. Because I mean, we're just at the beginning of the climate crisis, but it's already crazy. Like a third of Pakistan was underwater, and everybody in Colombia was talking about all the rain and the floods, and it's and so the more that occurs, the more helpful that is to push us towards 1.5 degrees C. And so I do think that we are. The lucky piece is that the climate crisis is quote unquote slow. And so we might have the ability to kind of get over our skis and then, oh boy, take a little bit of a step back and do what we're trying to do as a species right now, which is to kind of chill out. What we might not have that ability to do is with something like biotechnology or artificial intelligence, is because those might happen quicker. And if they do happen quicker, then it's like harder to adjust.
Hmm. So what else does information want?
Sick, bro. Um, so I mean, one thing that information wants is, so if you imagine, so it wants, we know it is it wants to replicate, it wants to be fit with its environment, it wants to access energy. Another thing that information wants is, in order to access energy, the information itself, the like little pattern, wants to um, it wants to find its own kind of orbit. And what I mean by that is, so you can imagine a fish, and a fish, it has its own little brain. Its brain has these priors, these like ideas for how it wants to be in the world. And those priors are things like, I want to be in water. And when a fish is out of water, it goes, whoa, that's like, the world is different than my priors. That's bad. I want to go back into the water. And so what we get is, um, instead of something like and so what you get is a fish that like kind of stays in a similar orbit. It like kind of stays in the water. And so these are similar to these bigger orbits that occur with, like, the sun or the Earth orbiting around the sun. That's kind of a stable way. It's like this
Mhm.
stable orbit that's occurring. And similarly, we call it a non-equilibrium orbit. Or a non-equilibrium steady state, is that a fish is in its own version of an orbit with respect to the environment. And so this is another thing that information wants, is it wants to be in a non-equilibrium kind of steady state as it's taking as input its environment. And let me see one other piece on that, which is that in order to do that, um, it needs to model its environment. And so you need to have, and this is Carl Friston stuff, predictive processing and things like that. Our brains are constantly taking as input sensory data, and then converting that to like internal sensory states, and then taking actions against it. And so what we have in the world is a situation where, if you are, for example, the fish, you're modeling your environment and you're staying in the water. If you're a bird, you're staying in the sky. Or, for example, if you're Ethereum, you're staying kind of in your own niche. You're not becoming too libertarian, because that would look more like Bitcoin, but you're not becoming too like NFT stuff like Solana. You're kind of staying in your own equilibrium state, kind of in your own niche, away from these other things. That's another thing that information wants, is to be in non-equilibrium steady state by modeling its environment.
Hmm. Got it. And what's another good example of that?
Um, yeah, so all animals do this. The simplest version of this, by the way, is a thermostat, where you can have a thermostat. It's like the thermostat's like, I want the world to be at 72 degrees Fahrenheit. And
Hmm.
then when it's 74, it's like, oh no, I want to like change the world to match my priors.
Right.
And so lots of thermostats do it, fish do it. Humans, the issue with humans is that we're so priced into our priors. Oh my god. Like, it's good to be
Hmm.
relatively priced in, like, I want to be where oxygen is. Like, that's a prior, like, a very strong prior that we probably shouldn't change, but we're way too, priced into our priors around like wanting to around like, oh, I'm a Democrat, I'm a libertarian, I'm a Republican. It's like, I think that having one thing that this implies to me is that we as a species need to get better at having more flexible priors, because that may have worked when we were in kind of smaller, simpler niches, but when you have an intense interconnected world, we need to have a kind of more pluralistic view on our priors and the kind of states that we can exist in.
Hmm. Got it. I mean, does the fact that we're sort of stuck in our priors point to something that information wants, which is that it like once you've flipped a bit in one direction, once you've got an idea in one direction, then you really don't want to be you're kind of seeking out things that hit your confirmation bias, not the things that are true. I mean, information wants to be comfortable is maybe the maxim there.
Yeah, yeah, that there's it wants to be comfortable. It wants to be in alignment with its priors, and it is. Yeah, we're definitely confirmation bias seeking creatures, and most everything is, and that's not bad, but it's just like when that should exist, and it should only be for certain things like safety and oxygen and stuff like that. But in theory, we want information to be a little bit more, and we want these kind of priors for humans to be kind of more expansive in their set. And I guess the other piece here is like when you think about you can think about this for when you talk about examples of this. It's just like and back to the thing of like essentially you can imagine Christianity. Christianity has done a good job of just like you were talking about its co-domestication. Christianity essentially has a very good model, just like we have a model of what Christianity is. Christianity also has the meme has a model of us, and so it knows. Oh wait, these humans they can reproduce, and if I make lots of them, then there'll be more of me. So I'm going to make Catholic families, and I'm going to say
Hmm.
divorce is not legal, and homosexual is not legal, and abortion's not legal, and so, because I want more copies of me to be produced. And I also know that like humans, they don't really know like what happens after death. So I'm going to say there's a God, And
Hmm.
so these are kind of things that in addition to like the brains modeling things, you can imagine the memes themselves as constantly modeling their environment in order to find like a long-term niche that they can live.
Hmm. Right. So I mean, there's Darwinistic natural evolution, which is how genes evolve. Is there a equivalent of natural selection for memes and comedics? I mean, like, do the memes that confer some sort of mimetic advantage, are they the ones that propagate?
Yeah. So what I would say is like, I mean, so the simple version of this is that um, yes, any meme that 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 gets access to energy and allows us to replicate more is going to replicate. And so that's
Hmm.
why we saw farming replicate. That's why we saw stone tools before that replicate. It's why we saw fossil fuels replicate. Um, and then we get the kind of second order replication. You can think of this, by the way, you can map kind of you can map photosynthesizers, herbivores and carnivores, and then fungi. You can map that into the world of memes, and you can see that some memes have direct connection to energy. So this is something like farming or fossil fuels, and the memes there are the idea of a factory, or a factory getting energy, or domesticating plants and animals. The things though moving up the food chain there, the mimetic energy food chain, is something like these narratives, and these narratives are ways that coordinate and motivate people, and do get access to energy, but get it kind of one step above, where you kind of have the natural access to energy. And then if you're Christianity, you then can get you can coordinate and motivate all the people to trust each other and do blah blah blah, and kill the other people that aren't you. In Darwinian evolution, where obviously there's only one God, and you have to do crusades and stuff like that against the other people. the kind of these narratives are kind of a level above the energy memes, and all these things are in kind of Darwinian, um, both competing but also collaborating, mimetic competition with each other.
Yeah. There's this I think there's this story that I read, something about like a parasite that would infest an ant and would make it climb up a glass, like a grass blade, a blade of grass, and it would basically climb up and just hang out at the top of a blade of grass until the parasite was able to replicate and put more of its spores in the air, and then the ant basically dies. But then like this spreads to more ants. I wish I was remembering the name of the parasite at this point, but I guess I'm wondering is like, you know, to what extent when I get a meme in my brain, is it using me versus me using it? At what point is it in control? Are we in control of these information organisms, or are these information organisms in charge of us? And like here's maybe like the ant thing is kind of like a little bit crazy, but like, like have fun staying poor. Like, to what extent is that an information organism that is propagating to make Bitcoin number go up? And at what point is it using me? I guess is the question. Maybe is there any way of knowing without having looking in retrospect, like if you got more rich, then have fun staying poor is maybe a symbiotic relationship as an information organism with you. But if you believe that Bitcoin was going to 120K and the super cycle will save us, but it turns out that it didn't get past 60K, maybe you're that ant that was going to the top of the blade of grass.
Yes. No, it's a great question. I think, and by the way, I love thinking of, and you can think about obviously hodl and have some fun staying poor and not going to make it. All these things are kind of
Yeah,
immune reactions to this, the idea that's, oh, you should sell. Things are going down. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. If you want to sell, that's great, but have fun staying poor. Oh, and GMI, don't forget to
yeah,
hodl. These are kind of mimetic reactions, like to be like, oh, no, everybody, like let's stay in, obviously 3-3, kind of Olympus DAO stuff is a version of this too. I
yeah,
think I think those so thinking of those things as kind of reactions and ways for the memes to kind of they're kind of playing defense against cell pressure essentially. And let me say one note on that, which is any kind of meme that propagates for a long time has that. So for example, free speech as a meme, if I come into you and I say, wait a second, I'm not really sure how game I am for free speech, you say, you're trying to get into my free speech, And so it's like, it has any kind of powerful meme has a natural things that try to doubt it. They say, no, wait a second, you can't doubt me, So when I come to Bitcoin, I'm like, I'm going to doubt you. It's like, you can't doubt me. HODL, NGMI. When I come to you and say, oh, free speech is bad, you're like, wait, I can say whatever I want. Don't be free speech to me. Like I'm averse to doubt. To your question though, I think that the way, and you can take again, trying to take the long view, the big history view of this. When you think about, so again, and coming from genes to memes, genes, the species, an individual kind of lion is not is not the primary what do you call this? The primary thing that's being acted upon by evolution. You can imagine it as like a deck of cards, and the deck of cards has a bunch of genes within it. Each card is a gene, and those cards get shuffled up, and then they get turned into a lion. And then that lion goes and makes babies, and then that baby then has like half of those genes, half of those playing cards that can get shuffled with another one. And the thing that is from a long-term evolutionary kind of omnipotent perspective, it's not the deck of cards that matter. It's like an individual gene that matters. And you're trying to see, like, if you look at it through time, you wouldn't even be able to tell which deck of cards emerge, but you would be able to tell, oh, there's this card, which is the idea of kind of like teeth or whatever, And so similarly with memes, I think that I kind of see it as like, that we are mostly hosts. I think that we're super over indexed on thinking that we're important. And I don't think that that's that true. I think that we should remove our ego, mostly see ourselves as vehicles and hosts, and try to think of in the long run, when you think about something like NGMI or have fun staying poor, that the humans that host those things are not the things that really matter in the end. It's kind of the um, it's this idea that there's going to be something. uh, that it's gonna this idea that you need to hold on to something in order to give it value. Like that's the like from a long term perspective, that's mimetic idea, the like playing card, the gene, the meme. That's actually the thing that matters from a long term perspective. Does that make sense?
Right. So what you're saying is, and I'm going to take a leap of faith with this one, is that information is one of the fundamental substrates of the universe, and I'm just a battleground where means, genes, and kinetics are battling for the future of their replication, and I'm just a vehicle towards that.
True. Let me
Okay.
say
There's the mic drop right there. We should end the
yeah,
episode here. No, go ahead, say it.
okay. Well, the other thing I was gonna say was we didn't talk about this too much, but there's the genes, which is for 4 billion years, and that's the tree of life. Then there's the memes, which are the the ideas that spread from mind to mind and all of narratives and technology and religion. And then there's this new third replicator. And you could say comedics, or you could say chemes, they're computer memes. And so
Mm,
the genes, memes, and chemes, or the genetics, memetics, comedics, so that's the kind of
mhm.
mapping. And so the idea is that there's this new um, thing, artificial intelligence that exists on a new substrate that has its own optimization function and its new form of replication. And that is when we think about the history of our species and the history of the universe, that is a very important moment, is that there's replicators don't come along very often, but now we have this third replicator that is emerging.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we really went into that, but what do computer replicators want? I mean, are we talking about foundationally the 7 layer stack of TCP/IP all the way up from the hardware to the network to the packet level? Is it are ki- it are Keems built on TCP/IP? And if so, how are they going to hijack the narrative in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think I would kind of break it into three different parts. So there's the first part is the internet, the second part is computers, and the third part is artificial intelligence. The internet is the internet allows like pictures to spread, and it allows these kind of like bits to spread. I'm not sure if it totally counts as a new replicator. And the reason why I say that is because the uh, so this is the difference between communication and computation. Communication, aka on the internet, is something that moves information through space, while computation is something that moves information through time, like changes it. And so the internet is just a thing that moves information around, but in the end, the substrate is and the optimization function is still kind of humans. So we were able to send pictures around before, um, and the pictures, they have to look nice, like either the woman or the lion or whatever it may be. It has to look the beautiful sunset. It has to look nice, and that internet gives us this ability to do communication, but the substrate is or the end optimization function is still humans. Similarly, so the second big piece here is computation, and I think that computation is when you're changing um, a pattern into a different pattern, and this is where code comes in and algorithms and all that stuff. And I think computation, the internet, or sorry, the human or the universe, new forms of computation don't emerge that often. So computers are very important, but in the end, as computers are computing on stuff, they're still mostly computing for us as an optimization function. And the final kind of third bit here is artificial intelligence. I think that's like kind of the most worrying one, which is that it's not just communication and moving. It's not just a new form of the book or a new radio or whatever. That's still in the end, humans and kind of memes are the kind of the optimization function. It's not just computation, which is taking patterns and changing them into other patterns, still for humans, where humans are the optimization function. Instead, it's built on this new substrate. It's this new thing that can replicate, but it might have its own optimization function, and that is the worrying piece.
Right. Okay, so the worry is that we get some sort of paperclip maximizer AI that sucks up all the energy and knows how to play everyone on a faster cycle, and they turn the whole world into paperclips or something like that.
Yeah, and that the correct yes, and that the correct frame on AI safety and the paperclip problem is not one of it's not
Yeah.
purely one of like moving through intelligent design space and stuff like that, and it's more one of trying to understand this new third replicator and how it accesses energy and what it wants to do in ways to kind of make it in alignment with us. So yeah.
Okay. Um, Yeah, I mean, I guess like, one of the sort of theories that I've had for a little while is that blockchains are kind of this like scorekeeping mechanism that allows you to create a heuristic. And maybe the most obvious heuristic that everyone, like, you listen to a trading podcast and everyone's trying to trade to their balance up so that they like have enough money to buy a house, or like their kids go to college or pay for a medical expense or something like that. So like there's an optimization game that's created by the heuristic of blockchain, which is tracking everyone's balances. And AI is this heuristic optimization engine. So AI is an optimization game that you can point at a scoring algorithm, and it figures out how to play and how to beat everyone else. So like eventually all of the Bitcoin and the ETH gets cornered by AIs that are like, we're all just like pawns on their ability to accumulate more balances. So like if capitalism is a paperclip maximizer, because everyone's just going for more profit, well, how do you expand out that heuristic game into the 8 forms of capital, from just financial capital to social capital, spiritual capital to intellectual capital to material capital? How do we get our AIs playing a game to reduce the carbon out of the atmosphere, or to intellectually enrich ourselves and stuff like that? So it feels like it feels like there's maybe some opportunity in there, but I'm not sure I can completely articulate it.
Oh, it's no, I mean, you're totally right. I think there's, and you could talk about this from a holistic ethics, holistic understanding perspective, where you want the AI to be coming from a holistic understanding perspective, thinking about the full system, while also optimizing for a holistic ethics, aka an eight dimensional version of capital, not just like financial capital, but all the spiritual capital. And then you want it, the final piece, and we didn't talk about this too much today, is like, and you want it to be in a good feedback loop where it's like it's doing things and it's like checking in with us or whatever. It doesn't just go off on its own and do its thing. It's kind of in a constant kind of feedback cycle with us as it plays that 8D chess game.
Hmm. Yeah, literally 8 dimensional chess, because there's 8 forms of capital. Do you think that information always optimizes for more energy? Do you think there's any times in which it optimizes for something else at the base layer? Like, I don't know, say entropy. Isn't the increasing entropy just a fundamental part of the universe? And, you know, uh, to me, entropy create I was at a bluegrass concert once, and the artist said, like, I just want to grasp some of that luscious entropy out there. And I was like, oh, creativity and art is kind of entropy. Um, do you think information wants entropy? Do you think that there's anything else that at a base layer that information wants that is more fundamental than energy?
Yeah, it's a funny question. I think that, well, so the first thing to note here is that, yeah, entropy, um, yeah, there are lots of weird different definitions of entropy. I think that um, and I think of entropy as, yeah, it's obviously the second law of thermodynamics. It's really a view of the best framing that I've heard on it is that it is you can think of it as a probability distribution, and that things with low entropy have um, they have a very short probability distribution. So it's like if I roll dice and it's 6 and 6, wow, that was very unlikely. And if you just keep hitting that a lot, it's like, wow, the probability distribution here is crazy. You must have weighted dice or something. It's like it's a low entropy scenario, aka a scenario where there's not much disorder, there's lots of order. You kind of know what you're going to pull out of the entropy of the probability distribution. Versus what the universe mostly tends towards is a probability distributions that are more kind of flat. And so, yeah, I think that information and specifically replicators are kind of pushing upstream against this desire for, because something like humans, the fact that you and I are having this chat over, Zencaster and over a podcast, shout out to our sponsor Zencaster.
Mhm.
The fact that we're having this is an unlikely event, and that we even exist, instead of our blobs, that we exist as humans that can chat with each other is unlikely. And in order to kind of push against entropy and to push against these kind of moving to these more flat probability distributions, you need energy to do it. And so I do think
Mhm.
that replicators really do want energy. And let me say actually one other piece here, which is so that's one piece, is that replicators do want energy because the energy allows them to push against the natural state of things, which is to push away towards flatter probability distributions. The other piece, though, is that um, there is, in some sense, replicators also, in addition to energy, they also want to be lazy and cheap and not use that much energy. And what I mean by that is, you can imagine, so the first kind of factories were things like printing presses. And why was that true instead of like t-shirts and stuff? It's because it's really cheap to just print bits, to just print pieces of like letters on a piece of paper. Um, versus something that requires more energy, like something like making a factory that makes cars. It's like a high energy input thing. And so oftentimes, um, you can imagine memes as these things that are trying to, they don't necessarily want to access energy, but if they can also just be really cheap. So something like a viral, like a TikTok dance or dun 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 dun, it's not really, it's not something like Christianity that has these long-term access to capital and resources, all that. All it is just like a cheap way to spread from mind to mind. And so you can either have things that are cheap and spread to mind, like virals and like low energy, kind of desirous replicators, and you could have stuff that just instead of being high energy output, it just is very stable. And so this is something like a stone tablet or something like, these hardness things, atoms, institutions, and blockchains, which is like a blockchain is a thing that it does want access to energy. It does actually need all the energy from proof of work, proof of stake in order to continue existing. But mostly what it wants to do is just like, hey, I'm a pattern. I'm a crystallized pattern in the world. And like, I don't really need more access to energy because I'm just chilling. So that's like another answer to the puzzle. Like, how do you stick around?
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, I think that we've been going for 55 minutes now. We should probably start converging and stop diverging.
Right.
So I'll just ask you one more thing with that in mind, and that's, what does information want, Rhys Lindmark?
um oh boy. Information wants to replicate. Sorry, information wants to be fit with its environment. It wants to be an orbiting blob, either a non-equilibrium or equilibrium blob. It wants to be fit with this environment. It wants to be it wants to get access to energy in order to do that. It wants to have a model of its environment in order to do that. It wants to kind of co-evolve with and in symbiosis with these long, um, with when the shadow of the future is long, um, and it hopefully wants to be in a metastable state with the other replicators that emerge.
Beautiful. All right. I was hoping to get one more newbie piece of
Oh, I mean,
information,
let
but
me let me
I
see if
guess the summary is good too.
the summer. I mean, yeah. I mean, is there actually another newbie? Um, eh, I mean, information.
Information wants you to buy the What Information Wants book
Book.
when it
There we
comes
go.
out
Perfect. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
this winter. Well, this has been a fun alpha leak of this specific one topic. I wanted to get into a bunch of different stuff, your history in the Colorado scene, Root, which I interpret as like an accelerator for people who want to get into some of these intellectual topics with you. You wrote a post called Marriage Counseling with Capitalism, which I think is really cool, and I wanted to get into that, but we did the whole episode on What Information Wants, so I'll have to invite you back to talk about all those other things. But yeah, I'm curious, maybe we could end on where can people find you in your work online if they want to learn more?
Yeah. So, and thank you, Iwaki, for the podcast, and just happy that you are. It is a blessing for us and me and you to be in. Yeah, this amazing, and for all our listeners to be in this beautiful mimetic niche with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Twitter. It's at Rhys Lindmark, RHYSLINDMARK. And yeah, check out, you can go to Root. That's the org that I run. And so we have a Root Foundation, which is sponsored by GraphFound Protocol and Protocol Labs and various other folks. And so that's kind of a nonprofit side that's trying to systems pill everybody. And then on the for-profit side, we have this Root Labs thing, which is like a startup studio. And we have like a Web3 and Society Center. So we're hoping to do more DAO work and help all DAOs succeed and make them be in loving co-evolving relationship with each other. So feel free to go to roote.co. It's Rudy or Root. It's Root. That's the other place to kind of check us out.
All right. What Information Wants is for you to click the links in the show notes and to follow Rhys on Twitter.
Thank you, Iwaki. Be well, everybody.
Thank you, Rhys. This was awesome. Bye.